Just sitting up here. Yeah. I'm just sitting up here in the balcony, and we will be getting started in a few minutes. Kelly, did you want to? Okay, welcome on you today to this little talk. We're going to talk about the Saenger Theater, and it got a because it's a very interesting story, and I think you'll enjoy it today. We're going to cover a couple of things: the history of the Saenger Theater, and as well as you can see, I'm sitting up here in the balcony of the theater, so I'm all ready to tell you all about it. So what we'll do is we'll start with Abe. There we go. We'll start with Abe and Julian Saenger. They were two brothers. They had a drugstore in Shreveport, Louisiana. They decided to build a movie theater in 1911. It was really, they wanted to show movies, but at the same time, the vaudeville was very active at the time, and there was a whole circuit. And so they operated as a vaudeville, and they also showed film. Eventually, they will create the Sanger Amusement Company. They will issue stock, board of directors, and they'll start buying movie theaters. Um, in Pensacola, they bought the Bonita Theater, and then in 1913 and 1914, they announced the building of a new movie theater in Pensacola, corner of Palafox and Garden Street, called the Isis Theater. And they originally just had a lease for it, but they eventually went ahead and bought it. They joined forces with a man in New Orleans named Fichtenberg, and Fichtenberg, some of the records say Fichtenberg dash Sanger, and some say Sanger dash Fichtenberg. But at least by the 1920s, it is the Sanger Amusement Company. Now, they would go on eventually to own 320 theaters across the South, including theaters in Costa Rica, Cuba, Jamaica, and Mexico. Many cases, they purchased the existing movie theaters and they just kept the names of them. You might not even know they were part of the Sanger chain. They did at least build seven, what we call seven movie houses across the South. This is an example of one of the theaters that they built or renovated in Shreveport, Louisiana. And they spent $1 million on this theater, and they opened it July 2nd, 1925. They're called the Strand. Doesn't say Sanger, but it's the Strand, and it was their 138th theater in their chain. And of course, then Pensacola opened in April of 1925. They already had at least 100 theaters by the time they opened the Sanger here. Now, like I said, they built four, with at least seven major movie palaces across the South that they then did call the Sanger Theater. And there's four of them that still survive today. Their first construction, their flagship, we call it, was their New Orleans theater. They spent $2.4 million in 1923, 1924, and opened in 1924 with a seating of 4,000 people. The interior was described as Italian Baroque courtyard theme with Greek and Roman statues. It it was also plays and vaudeville and so forth. Changed entirely to movie by 1933, became a theater again in 1980, closed in 2005, and after a $53 million renovation, it reopened in 2013 and is now in use in New Orleans. Another theater they built was the Sanger Theater in Mobile. It was there in 1927. And again, it's hard to tell the numbers. This something I had said it was the 61st Sanger Theater, but that doesn't jive with some of the other numbers. When it opened, it was called Alabama's Greatest Showplace. I'll come back to that phrase. Cost $500,000, had a Robert Morton Theater, 4 floors, a dressing room, musicians and chorus room, 2,615 seats. And the theme is the motif of a French palace of the Renaissance. Now, because it opened on February or January 19th, that was Robert E. Lee's birthday. The local United Daughters of the Confederacy presented a large portrait of General Robert E. Lee, which hung in the lobby area. And in the 1970s, it closed, and it was on the peak of destruction, but University of South Alabama bought it, did some restoration work to it, and used it for a while, and then sold it to the city of Mobile in 1999, and it had been restored at a cost of $6 million. You look at the colored picture at the bottom, you're going to see another colored picture of the Saenger Theater, and you're going to say they look exactly alike, and they're very close. The another one that has survived of the seven was city of Hattiesburg, and it was built in 1929 and opened Thanksgiving Day 1929. It closed in 1974 after showing of its final film, The Exorcist, and it was restored and renovated in 2022. The organ in it, however, there was an organ in it at the time, and the mayor of Hattiesburg, was able to personally buy it from a private owner, and he paid to have it repaired and reinstalled. All the costs were donated by the mayor. And of course, the fourth theater that it still exists today is our own Saenger Theater in Pensacola, which had the title Florida's greatest showplace when it opened. Remember, Alabama's greatest showplace is in Mobile. And in our case, construction began in 1924. It opened in 1925, cost between $400,000 and $500,000. Um, it also uses material from the Pensacola Opera House. The old Pensacola Opera House, which stood on the corner of Government and Jefferson Street, was finally demolished and really damaged heavily by the hurricane of 1916, and it was torn down in 1917. And a lot of the materials were moved from the site over to near where the present day Saenger Theater is. And so when they started building the Saenger, they used bricks and other kinds of things, including old wrought iron and all, in the new Saenger Theater. Now, in 1924, they started looking at this theater, and the company Saenger was taking bid for it, and so there were people here looking at the lot, looking at the places to build. And there was also another old theater here called the um, Halftime Theater, and it was also torn down, and the chairs were sent off to a small town in Arkansas. In January 1924, the C.H. Turner Company of Pensacola was awarded the contract for the Saenger for $300,000, and they planned an entrance front of 55 foot high with 1,500 to 2,500 seats, steam heat, and 6 Typhoon fans to circulate air. These were giant fans, 7, 10 foot in diameter. Had 16 dressing rooms and a mezzanine floor. And one of the comments at the time, that they're hoping that a lot of people will travel over here from other cities as the bridge is getting built across the Escambia River, Escambia Bay, between Milton and Pensacola. That really does not open until 1926. But when that opens, then there's still a ferry there. But when that opens, they hope that people would come to the theater here. And of course, the cost mushroomed and things cost more. And so the new Saenger Theater was opened in April 2nd, 1925. And that was a $500,000 theater. And the first film here shown here was Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. Um, And you can see on this ad here in the paper, the main floor and the first 3 rows of the balcony were $1.50 ticket. The balance of the balcony was $1 ticket. The colored section and was 77 cents, and then the balcony above that was 50 cents. And the interesting thing about the Ten Commandments about this time is Technicolor is starting to be used. There's really 4 processes. This is Technicolor, what's called Technicolor 2, and this is what the audiences would have seen if they watched the Ten Commandments on the screen. at the Saenger Theater in 1925. And I like this picture. This is downtown Pensacola in the 1920s. And you can see, I blew it up, but you can see the 55-foot facade of the Saenger Theater at that time. Now, when the theater opened, this is the staff that staffed the theater in 1925. You got the doorman, relief doorman, chief usher, cashier, relief cashier. You got ushers. I noticed all the ushers are young women. You have the chief projectionist and stage carpenter, stage electrician, property man, musicians, all these musicians, and the house staff. You have to understand when the Saenger Theater opens, it is showing movie, but it is still on the vaudeville circuit, and so it's being used for other kinds of performances and things where you need to have live music and staff to help build things and help move things around. Um, this is the African American, or at that time colored entrance to the theater, and it leads directly to a staircase, not an elevator, but staircases to get up to the balcony area. Now, after the 1 year, the Sanger celebrated its birthday, and they put out this little booklet, which we have here in the archive. And it's really interesting. It shows photographs of some of the people. This is Theodore Pfefferly, the doorman at the Sanger, and it said he religiously observed rules and instruction. Um, and I'm sure the handlebar mustache, carefully manicured, people look forward to him greeting you at the door. You will see this is a movie palace. This requires this requires outfits and costume, and I mean it's just the ultimate in entertainment. Um, the These young ladies were cashiers. It noticed the lady at the right, Miss Sally Johnson, that she recently won the West Florida Physical Beauty Contest. Um, and these are very much style hairstyles of 1925. These are the program girls. These are the girls that handed out programs at the Sanger in 1925. 1926, and you can see they're dressed in a native motif outfit for the area. And this is the Sanger mascot. This is Big Boy the 13th. He was registered with the American Kennel Club. He actually belonged to the manager, John A. Jones, and he was frequently seen around the theater. And sad to say, I did find an obituary for him 10 years later in the paper where he had passed away, and he was the Airedale. He'd become really famous around the Sanger and hanging around the box office and employees and so forth. This is a picture of the orchestra and the musician. This is from the 1926 booklet after 1 year. Um, I find it very interesting because it gives us details about some of the musicians in Pensacola. It talks about people that served with the 3rd Battalion Band and also at the bottom, Company A Band of Fort Barrancas. So obviously the musician drew on the musicians that were here as part of the military crew. And this is the housekeeper, people in charge and back. Um, One of the things about the Sanger, they also had porters. They don't have a picture of them, but they also had porters because they were helping people and vaudeville people with their luggage back and forth from the train station and so forth for performances. And this is Miss Ann Gailey, who was the organist at the Sanger. Um, and she actually had quite a career in Pensacola. There's a lot of other things we have in the archives about her and her participation in the local theater and everything. And 10 years after that 10-year program, another program came out celebrating their 10th anniversary, and she's pictured here again in this one. And she also gives a program every Sunday on WCOA radio for half an hour. This is some of the Saenger staff in 1935. This is 10 years later. Johnny Jones is still there. But these are the doormen and the ushers. And you can see they're all have uniforms and everything befitting the movie palace theme of the Saenger. Now you've seen this picture before. I showed you this with the tall facade of the Saenger noticeably in the street. But if you look at the street, it's kind of hidden away. And so in the 1930s, maybe early 1940s, the Saenger began hanging these signs over the street, and they say Saenger latest talking picture. I used this in my front one when I for a larger picture. Um, and this is looking north on Palafox Street, where you can see the sign and the banner, and for people know that the theater is there. This is the balcony. This is looking into the theater in the 1930s, 40s. Look very much like the picture I gave you of the Mobile Saenger Theater. And this is a 1953 picture. There was Louisville Nashville Railroad had a wharf that extended out into the water, and it caught fire in 1953, a very disastrous fire. And this picture was taken simply for that purpose. But the neat thing about it is you can see that the front of the Saenger had been changed. There is a large vertical marquee now that they can put lettering on and tell what kind of show. And then there's a large flat marquee at the ground level. I'll show you another picture of that a little bit later on, show you how that's used. Um, and this is a picture sometime in the 1950s, 1960s. I was able to figure out the title of the movie at the very top of the Sanger sign, which is Bloodlust of the Voodoo Queen, which was released in 1962 and kind of got to Pensacola around 1963. So that marquee is still here in the 1960s. Um, and then this is another picture in the 1950s into the 1960s, again showing that. Oh, that's the same picture. I just blew up that bloodlust sign, but you can see what downtown Pensacola looks like at the time. And then at some point, they got rid of that marquee and they went to a simple little marquee here. I don't have a date for this picture, but it's kind of interesting. And of course, then in the 1980s, early 1980s, the Senate, it was remodeled, it was renovated, and now it's open, and the marquee's open. It also have undergone another renovation a few years back to make the seats a little wider, create a handicap section, add some more dressing room and the like. And today it looks like this, which very much looks like the Mobile Saenger Theater, the same Baroque motif. And now I'll move to talking a little bit about some of the movies shown here. I uh, I did this talk before one time, and I chose the year 1930. And 1930 because that's the time that everything is really changing from vaudeville to much more technical movie theaters. And in 1930, they said, why are people coming to the movie theater? Well, it's just out 1 year after the Depression of 29, the stock market crash. And so they said people are starving, scared, hopeless. And for one little nickel, what do we give them? 2 hours in the dark, singing, dancing, laughter, tears, romance, and hope. And when the Sanger Theater in 1930 had the title Home of Paramount Pictures, they would show a new film on Sundays and Mondays, a new film on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and a new film on Friday and Saturday. So it was possible on a weekend to go to the movie, say on Saturday, and see one film, and on Sunday would be a different one. And ticket prices from 11 to 1 were 25 cents, from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock, 40 cents, and after 6 o'clock they were 50 cents, but children were 10 cents for a ticket. Now, most of the films are multi-reel. That is, you have to change the reel. So when the Sanger opened, they had two giant projectors. So you put reel one on one, and as it reached the end, you would start the other projector. And so many of the film will have multiple reels. They call them, sometimes they say 6 reel film. Um, Certainly, Cecil B. DeMille's film was a six-reeler, for example. In 1930, I've got a few here showing you kind of progression through the year of 1930, the kind of picture. So the pictures are, of course, black and white mostly, but the lobby cards for the pictures are all in color. January 3rd to 4th, I showed a film called Street Girl. Notice 100% dialogue. Although they didn't have color, by this time they had started adding sound to the movies, and the projectors could play the sound, and so you could hear the music and the sound. And these are some of the films that they were showing. Um, this one is kind of interesting. These were the pointed heels was noted for being a two-tone Technicolor sequencer. In other words, the whole film is not color. It's just there are a couple of places that are two-tone Technicolor sequencers. And so what I mean by two-tone is how do you get color into the movie? Well, there was the two-color Technicolor process, and it would produce film that looked like this. And the way it was done is you would shoot a movie with two cameras. You would shoot one for using a green filter and one using a red filter. And so that would create you a red and a blue film. You would develop those and you would splice them together. You would glue the two pieces of film together and you would end up with this kind of thing where the blue and the green would create this color image. It's not perfect, but it certainly was shocking and amazing to people that could see this kind of thing. Now, Sanger continued to have road shows. This is interesting because it's a road show called a musical comedy road show called The Vagabond King with 100 people involved. Um, and the prices went up $3, $2.50, $2, $1.50 in the gallery, um, and no tax. And the Vagabond King. It was a large operetta, and it was one night only. 100 people come in here, and then they get on the train and they move on to New Orleans, or they head head east to Tallahassee or Jacksonville, and it will take place in medieval France. Now, what's interesting is that the operetta came in live performance in January, but by April, in this intervening time, um, Hollywood had made a movie of this. Paramount had made a 100% Technicolor, all talking, singing romance, The Vagabond King with Jeanette MacDonald. And so later, Sanger would show this film the same year. Many of the stars' names we know of today were in these films. Marie Chevalier was in this movie with Jeanette MacDonald also. Um, and Warner Brothers began producing color film. Technicolor could be licensed to the various studios. And so Warner Brothers is the fifth color film featuring most of the Warner Brothers stars. This was sort of like um, it was just a variety show. It was just constantly act after act after act filmed together into one movie. And then Rudy Valley was a prominent singer at the time, but you could actually hear him in movies. The amazing thing is some of the people that were movie stars actually once sound came along disappeared because their voices were not feminine enough or masculine enough or strong enough for movies, and they just could not cross over. Rudy Valley, of course, made a career of singing, and so you could also get a Victrola. You could go visit Reynolds Music House and buy a Victrola record or even sheet music, and so there was a tie-in with all of these kinds of things. Um, and this one, National Picture Sally, was shown in February. It is the fourth all sound, all color picture film made. So 30s is really when you start seeing sound and color movies, and the black and white ones start fading out. We have another one, the February, the Viking, going to be shown all in natural color and sound. This is a still from that. It produced in 1928 as the first feature-length Technicolor film that featured a soundtrack and was made in the third Technicolor process called Tech Process 3. Um, and of course, didn't get the Saenger for 2 years, but this, like I say, was the first full-length, feature-length Technicolor film. And this is a still from that film, give you an idea of what the Technicolor looks like. In April, they showed Greta Garbo, a movie, Anna Christie. This is all talking. They're all talking now movies, although they are black and white. And of course, I mentioned that The Vagabond King came to the theater as a film, and it was shown in April of 1930. And they actually promoted it by having a midnight show. And for Paramount, this was their first 100% all Technicolor, all talking picture. Two color process, that's that green and red filter to put those two together to get your color images. This is an example of what they look like. And then, of course, I mentioned when the Sanger opened, they had the giant fans to circulate air. Well, they finally installed air conditioning in April of 1930, and so now they could change their wording in the paper from just simply Sanger to Sanger with snow and icicles on them to emphasize the fact that they were now a good, cool theater for you just in time for the hot summers of Pensacola. And this is another example of the marquee in the 1930s into the 1940s. That in front of the theater, the marquee says in part, "The Party of the Stars, Paramount," and if you have all talkie, singing, laughing. Sometimes the theater would use events, local events, and combine them. So, in other words, they had a film called, it was more of a documentary called With Bird at the South Pole, filmed in the vast Antarctic. And so they organized a special showing for the Boy Scouts. And so they had Boy Scout parade through Pensacola, went to the Sanger Theater where they would be guests at the first showing of the Bird film, which would be there for 3 days. Um, and here is the ad that was in the paper, sponsored by Bocar Coffee and Quaker Made Beans, sold exclusively at all the local A&P grocery store. It's July 8th, which is one of the hottest times of year for Pensacola. Well, you notice the ad says that the cool Sanger. Uh, in August of 1930, they showed perhaps one of the most important films made in the 30s, All Quiet on the Western Front. It was the first film to win two Academy Awards, and it won perhaps one of the most violent films of the time. And it ran for 2 hours and 30 minutes, 2 hours and 32 minutes, which was almost a record for films at the time. But you could also find comedy at the Sanger Theater, and so of course the Marx Brothers movie Animal Crackers, of course, was shown here. Eddie Cantor singing career made it through, and so in October they showed his film Whoopee, a comedy musical western film photographed in two-color Technicolor. Again, that's going to be the red and blue kind of thing. And what's really interesting was there was a robbery at the Sanger in 1930. Uh, They staff found that the safe had been hammered open, and while the robbers got away with $40 in change outside the safe and the manager's gun, they couldn't penetrate the third door of the safe, which had $2,400 in movie receipts from Saturday and Sunday nights. And given the price of tickets, this theater was doing very, very well. Oh, by the way, they did capture the robbers, but they managed to escape the county jail actually by uh, making ropes out of knotted bed sheets and climbing down the exterior of the building, just like we see in the movies. In November, they showed Amos and Andy's first radio motion picture. People could hear them on the radio, but this is the first time they could see him in the movie. And also in the lobby of the Saenger Reynolds Music House showed off their new refrigerators and also their new uh, uh, radios and so forth. Alabaster Jewelry, which was right next to the Sanger and is still there today, get a promotion with the Sanger. And so if we went to the Sanger, you got a ticket, and you might win one of these three prizes and so forth. And it says in the middle of the ad on November 30th, 1930, Monday night at 9 p.m. They're going to draw the tickets for the winners and the winner must be present. In December, Sanger decided to begin offering in 1930 Saturday matinees for children. They worked with Agnes Reynolds PTA, and they started a series. There was a series that the studios had produced called Life of North American Indian, and they offered prizes for the best poster designed by the children for the thing. So it was a whole contest, and so there were free admission on Saturday, December 13th, 1930. Free admission of all school children who would bring a doll or some leftover toy that could be fixed and given to the poor at Christmas. And this sort of begins the whole movie thing of the Saturday matinee on children. This is a serial, so this is number one, and they'll show again the next Saturday. Now the catch is they didn't clear the theater after these, so you could bring parents could bring their children and buy tickets and watch the Indians are coming, and then they got to watch the next movie. And both of these, in this case, this in this case on December 20th, the next movie is a scary gangster film, Jimmy Cagney's The Doorway to Hell. And I'm kind of struck by the fact that maybe they weren't the kind of movies you really wanted your children to see after bringing them to see the children's matinee. Uh, and they also did a charity benefits for Christmas, and from the charity benefits were local people that would do performances, and then they also would show a film as well. And for Christmas they guaranteed a movie feature which would carry you to 1980 AD. Just imagine the future in 1980 AD. And Kitty Matinee continued December 27th. They again the third. They also had I called it the Kitty Club Journal, New Journal Sanger Kitty Club, and they would have a program of different kinds of events. If you look at these are little shows done by the students. And in 1931, as the year ends, uh, the Finn takes a holiday. Um, and other movies. And they also, what I thought interesting when they start the new year, they celebrate it with lots of boat whistles. There are boats and freighters in the harbor shipping, and so one of the things, and there are industrial companies downtown. So one of the ways they celebrated New Year's in Pensacola, they actually with all these things would blow their whistles for that New Year's. And I'll end here with the Sanger logo, the crown on top. and I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you again in the balcony at the Saenger Theater at their next show then. Thank you. Bye
Dean,
bye. Yeah.
Dean,
Yeah.
this is Stephanie. Um, do you mind if I make the announcement?
Hold on a second. Okay, say that again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, that's better.
Um,